The silver ship appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like a dream made real. It was smooth and flowing, nothing like the blocky human vessels that struggled through space with fire and noise. This alien craft moved with grace, as if space itself welcomed its presence. On the orbital station circling Earth, Captain Li Wu watched the screens with wide eyes. He had been a soldier for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien ship was sending signals, not harsh radio bursts like human technology, something that sounded almost like singing. "Captain, you need to hear this," called Dr. Park So-young from her workstation. She was Earth's best language expert. The person who could speak 12 human languages and understand the patterns behind them all. Now she stared at symbols flowing across her screen like living poetry. The alien message was beautiful. It moved through mathematical concepts, the way music moved through different notes. Dr. Park felt tears in her eyes as she worked to understand it. "They want permission to come closer," she said to the emergency meeting. "But they're saying more than that. They have one word that means peace and harmony and understanding all together. I don't know how to translate it properly." Admiral Kim Tae-ho looked at the military reports spread before him. Earth had 3 space stations with weapons, a few fighter ships that were still being tested, and a lot of brave people who had no idea what they were facing. "If this goes wrong, what are our chances?" he asked. General Han Min-soo, an old soldier with scars from Earth's last great war, shrugged. "We've fought against bad odds before. We're still here." The alien ship took 3 days to cross the solar system. It could have moved faster. The humans could tell from their instruments that it was barely using its engines. Instead, it drifted toward Earth like a leaf on a gentle wind, sending mathematical messages that proved it meant no harm. When the alien finally appeared in the United Nations building, the humans gasped. She looked like a person made of living crystal, tall and graceful, with features that seemed to glow with inner light. Her movements were smooth and perfect, as if she had never known anger or fear. Ambassador Velthara had done this 17 times before. 17 different worlds, 17 different species, all brought peacefully into the great Galactic Federation. She knew how these meetings went. The primitive species would be amazed, then grateful, then eager to join the galaxy's community of peaceful worlds. But these humans confused her. They sat around their meeting table, trying to hide weapons that any child could sense. Their thoughts buzzed with worry and suspicion. Yet when she looked deeper, she saw something else: a fierce love for their own kind. A willingness to fight and die for their families that made her crystal heart ache with something she didn't understand. "We bring you the gift of eternal peace," she said, her words flowing through the translation device in perfect English. "Your world can join countless others in harmony, where conflict is solved through understanding, where no one needs to fear or fight." The human leader, President Song Hai-jin, listened carefully. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but Velthara could sense the steel beneath her gentle manner. "We would welcome peace," the president said slowly. "But we have to ask what happens when someone doesn't want your gift. What do you do when someone chooses to fight instead of talk?" The question hit Velthara like a physical blow. In all her years, across all her diplomatic missions, no one had ever asked that. The Federation had been so successful for so long that the possibility of someone refusing peace seemed impossible. Around the table, the human military leaders watched her carefully. They saw her perfect composure crack just slightly, saw the moment of uncertainty cross her crystalline features. These were people who had lived through wars, who had seen what happened when diplomacy failed, who knew that not everyone in the universe might want the same things the Federation offered. Captain Li Wu found himself feeling sorry for the beautiful alien ambassador. She was clearly good, clearly meant well, clearly believed in the power of peace. But she had the look of someone who had never met true evil, never faced an enemy who couldn't be reasoned with. Dr. Park So-young watched the alien's reaction and understood something important. The Federation's success hadn't come from superior wisdom. It had come from never meeting anyone who fundamentally disagreed with their goals. They had been lucky for so long that they had forgotten luck could run out. The meeting ended with polite words and promises to talk more later. But as the humans filed out of the room, they carried with them a troubling thought. If the Federation had never faced someone who refused to talk, what would happen if such an enemy appeared? What would these peaceful crystal beings do when words finally failed? Ambassador Velthara remained in the empty room for a long time, staring at the chair where the human president had sat. The question echoed in her mind like a warning bell, suggesting possibilities her perfect civilization had never prepared for. Outside, stars shone down on two very different species, each beginning to realize how much they had to learn from. The other, Dr. Park Saw-Young, pressed her hands against her head, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. For 3 weeks now, she had been trying to help humans and aliens talk to each other. The translation machines worked perfectly, every word came through clearly in both languages, but somehow they still couldn't understand each other. Going crazy, she told the human team during their morning meeting. The Valorians have 47 different words for peace. 47. They have words for the peace you feel in a garden, the peace between old friends, the peace that comes after a storm. But when I try to tell them about justice, about making things right when someone does wrong, their computer just says, harmony-restoration-through-understanding. Cho Jung-suk shook his head. He was a practical man who had spent his life solving problems. How can they not have a word for justice? What happens when someone in their society commits a crime? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Dr. Park said. I think maybe they never had to deal with real criminals. That afternoon, the talks continued in the same frustrating pattern. Ambassador Velthara sat across from the human negotiators, her crystal body glowing softly in the conference room lights. She moved like she was floating, never seeming to touch the ground, always perfectly calm and graceful. Your people worry too much about blame, she said to General Cho, her voice like gentle music. When there is conflict, the important thing is to heal the hurt in the community. Why do you want to punish instead of understand? General Cho leaned forward, his scarred hands flat on the table. He had fought in 3 wars and seen too much death to be patient with pretty words. Let me ask you something simple. A man breaks into a house and kills a family mother, father, 2 children. Just kills them for no reason. What does your Federation do with him? The alien ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Her crystal features flickered like light through water. We would seek to understand why he felt driven to such actions. We would help him find peace within himself and restore harmony with his community. And if he doesn't want to be helped? Commander Yoon Dae-yoon asked. She was younger than the general, but had seen her share of violence. What if he likes killing? What if he wants to do it again? All beings desire harmony. Ultimately, Velthara said, but there was something uncertain in her voice now. It is simply a matter of finding the right words, the right approach to healing. No, said General Cho flatly. Some people are broken in ways that can't be fixed. Some people choose to hurt others because they enjoy it. What do you do with them? The crystal being seemed to shrink slightly. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she looked confused, almost frightened. We have never encountered such a situation. Dr. Lee Jae-won had been watching quietly from the corner. He studied minds for a living, tried to understand why people did the things they did. Now he saw something important happening. Ambassador, he said gently, has your Federation ever met a species that refused to talk, that attacked you without trying to communicate first? The silence in the room was heavy. Velthara's glow seemed to dim as she considered the question. All intelligent species seek understanding, she said finally. All conflicts can be resolved through proper communication and patience. But what if they can't? Pressed Commander Yoon. What if someone attacks your worlds, kills your people, and won't listen to any words you say? That is not possible, Velthara said, but her voice was weak now. Intelligence naturally leads to cooperation. Violence is simply a failure of communication. General Cho stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the city below, millions of people going about their daily lives, protected by laws and police and soldiers who were ready to fight when fighting was necessary. Ambassador, I want to show you something. He activated the wall screen and brought up historical footage scenes from Earth's past. Not the worst violence, but enough to make his point. Wars and crimes, people hurting each other for power, for money, for fun, for no reason at all. This is why we have prisons, he said. This is why we have armies. Not because we love fighting, but because some people will always choose to hurt others. And when words fail, when someone won't listen to reason, someone has to stop them. Belthera stared at the images with something like horror. Her perfect crystal features reflected the light from the screen, showing scenes of violence that her species had never had to face. But surely, surely if you just found the right words, We tried, said Dr. Park So-young quietly. For thousands of years, humans have been trying to solve problems with words. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, innocent people die while we're still talking. The alien ambassador sat in stunned silence, her glow flickering like a candle in the wind. For the first time in her long life, she was facing ideas that her perfect civilization had never prepared her for. The meeting ended early that day, with more questions than answers hanging in the air between two very different species. The alarms started screaming at 0300 hours across 17 different worlds. Commander On Jun-ho was drinking coffee on the bridge when the first reports came flooding in. His cup shattered on the metal floor as he stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Red dots appeared, one after another. Federation colonies, going silent, not just losing contact, but completely dark. Dead, sir. We're getting emergency signals from the outer colonies. Lieutenant Kim Soo-jin called from her station. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked the controls. Kepler Station just went offline. So did New Geneva and Harmony Prime. Commander On felt his stomach drop. Harmony Prime was home to 3 million people. It was the Federation's newest success story, a world where 5 different species live together in perfect peace. How many are we losing? 17 so far? Sir, and counting. The enemy ships appeared on their screens like ghosts materializing from a nightmare. They were dark, angular things that seemed to eat light rather than reflect it. No beautiful curves like Federation vessels, no elegant lines like human ships. These were built for one purpose only. They're not sending any messages, Lieutenant Kim reported. No demands, no warnings, no attempts to communicate at all. They just attack. Admiral Kim Tae-ho arrived on the bridge within minutes, still pulling on his uniform jacket. He was a man who had studied war his entire life, even during the peaceful years when everyone said such knowledge was obsolete. He stared at the tactical display with the cold eyes of someone who recognized what he was seeing. Look at the pattern, he said quietly. They hit the communication arrays first, cut each world off from calling for help. Then they target civilian areas, hospitals, schools, residential zones. They're not here to conquer. They're here to exterminate. The aliens called themselves Zephyrians, though no one knew if that was their real name or just what the Federation computers had labeled them. They moved through space like a plague, systematic and thorough. Each attack followed the same pattern. Disable communications, destroy population centers, strip the world of useful resources. Move on. Captain Lee Woo-jin watched the feeds from his command ship, feeling rage build in his chest like a fire. These weren't soldiers fighting soldiers. These were monsters killing families while they slept. 17 worlds, he said. How many people is that? 42 million so far, Lieutenant Kim answered in a small voice. Sir, the Federation Council is requesting an emergency meeting. Federation's response was exactly what Admiral Kim had expected. They followed their protocols, their centuries-old procedures for dealing with hostile contact. They tried to talk. Ambassador Velthara herself led the diplomatic mission. She took the fastest ship the Federation had and raced toward the Zephyrian fleet, broadcasting messages of peace in 17 different languages. She offered them territory, resources, knowledge, anything they wanted if they would just stop the killing. The Zephyrians' answer came in the form of energy beams that turned the diplomatic ship into glowing gas in seconds. They vaporized her, Captain Lee said, his voice hollow. Didn't even slow down to look at her surrender offers. Just deleted her. More diplomatic ships followed. The Federation sent their best negotiators, their wisest leaders, their most skilled ambassadors. Each one broadcast the same message. We want to understand. We want to help. Please talk to us. The Zephyrians destroyed them all without acknowledgement. Commander On watched 17 more ships die on his screens and felt something break inside him. These weren't warriors meeting in honorable combat. This was butchery, plain and simple. The Federation kept sending people to reason with enemies who had no interest in reason. Sir Lieutenant Kim called out, "We're getting reports from survivors. The Zephyrians aren't taking prisoners. They're not enslaving people or demanding tribute. They're just killing everyone." Admiral Kim studied the tactical reports with growing horror. The Federation had been so successful for so long that they had forgotten such enemies could exist. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that all intelligent beings could be reasoned with, that every conflict had a peaceful solution. The Zephyrians proved them wrong in the most terrible way possible. "They're not interested in our words," Admiral Kim said quietly. "They're not interested in our offers or our surrender. They see us as resources to be harvested, nothing more." Federation Council met in emergency session, their crystal chambers filled with desperate voices. High Counselor Murthan spoke for all of them when she said, "Our methods are not working. We need ... We need ... She couldn't finish the sentence. For a species that had spent millennia solving every problem through dialogue, the words wouldn't. Captain Li Wujin stood up on his bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Zephyrians were moving toward the next world. The next group of innocent people who would die while diplomats tried to find the right words to say. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," he ordered. "It's time to ask for help from people who understand that some problems can't be solved with conversation." The Federation had spent centuries perfecting the art of peace. Now they needed to learn the art of war from the only species that remembered how to fight. The Federation leaders sat in their emergency meeting room, staring at the star maps covered in red marks. Each red mark was a dead world, 42 million. People gone in less than a week, and the Zephyrians were still moving, still killing. High Counselor Murthan looked older than her 1,000 years. Her crystal features had lost their glow, dimmed by grief and failure. All around the table, the greatest minds of the Federation sat in stunned silence. Everything they knew, everything they believed, had failed. "We need help," she said finally, the words scraping from her throat like broken glass. "We need the humans." The call went out to Earth within hours. Admiral Kim Tae-ho received it aboard his flagship, surrounded by officers who had been preparing for this moment since first contact. Unlike the Federation, humans had studied war even during peacetime, had planned for enemies who couldn't be reasoned with. 72 hours, Admiral Kim announced to his staff. That's how long we have to turn a bunch of scared refugees into a fighting force. The transformation was incredible to watch. While Federation ships fled in panic from advancing Zephyrian fleets, human vessels moved with purpose through the chaos. Captain Park Min-ho took charge of the evacuation operations, turning cargo ships into rescue vessels and turning terrified civilians into organized refugee convoys. Commander? Yoon Dae-yoon worked without sleep for 3 days straight, establishing supply lines that could feed and shelter millions of displaced people. She turned luxury space stations into refugee camps and converted tourist ships into mobile hospitals. But what amazed the Federation survivors most was how humans did both things at once. They prepared for war while saving lives, organized attacks while caring for victims. Ambassador Velthara watched Commander On Gun-ho from the bridge of a human warship. He was directing supply drops to a Federation colony that was still under siege, making sure food and medicine reached the people trapped on the surface. At the same time, he was planning the military operation that would drive the Zephyrians away from that same world. "I don't understand," she said to him. "How can you think about fighting and saving at the same time?" Commander On looked up from his tactical displays. His face was tired. He hadn't slept in 50 hours, but his eyes were clear and determined. "That's why we fight," he said simply. "Not because we hate the enemy, but because we love what we're protecting." Lieutenant Colonel Seo Hyun-woo overheard the conversation. He was planning the assault on the Zephyrian fleet, but he took a moment to explain. War isn't about destroying things, Ambassador. It's about protecting things. The destruction is just. What happens to anyone who tries to hurt what we care about? The first big battle came at Kepler 442, a Federation world that was home to 2 million people. The Zephyrians had surrounded it with their dark ships, slowly destroying the cities, while the planet's defenders begged for mercy that would never come. The Zephyrian fleet commander had done this 100 times before. First came the desperate radio messages from the doomed world. Then came the diplomatic ships with their offers of surrender. Finally came the fleet of survivors trying to evacuate who they could, before running away to die somewhere else. But this time was different. The human fleet didn't send diplomatic messages. They didn't offer to negotiate or surrender. They came out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships moving like dancers in a deadly ballet that the Zephyrians had never seen before. Admiral Kim Taho stood on his bridge, watching the enemy. Formation with the eyes of someone who had studied their tactics for weeks. "They're used to fighting scared animals," he said to his officers. "They've never fought hunters." The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zephyrians were used to enemies who panicked, who broke formation, who tried to run. When things got dangerous, human ships fought like they were part of a single mind, each vessel knowing exactly where the others would be. When the Zephyrians concentrated their fire on the human warships, expecting them to retreat, Captain Wu Jin led his fighters into an attack that destroyed 3 enemy vessels in minutes. When the aliens tried to target the rescue ships evacuating civilians, Commander Park Young-suk's squadron appeared from nowhere to shield them. The Zephyrians had superior technology, but they had never faced an enemy that treated war like a science. Human commanders had studied every recording of their attacks, analyzed every pattern, and found every weakness. Most shocking of all was what humans did with captured enemy technology, where other species would guard military secrets jealously. Humans immediately shared everything they learned. Within hours of capturing a Zephyrian weapon, the technical specifications were being broadcast to every Federation world that could still receive them. Dr. Juan explained it to a confused Federation officer. "Every world that can defend itself is one less world we have to protect. Every species that can fight back makes our common enemy weaker." The battle for Kepler 442 lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Zephyrian fleet was destroyed, and 2 million people were safe. But more importantly, something had changed. In the galaxy, for the first time in their expansion across the stars, the Zephyrians had been stopped. Not by diplomacy or surrender, but by organized resistance that refused to give up. The message spread faster than their ships. Someone was finally fighting back. The conference room on New Geneva was unlike any meeting place the galaxy had ever seen. Representatives from 40 different species sat around tables that mixed elegant Valorian crystal with practical human steel. The walls displayed star charts showing rebuilt worlds. Alongside memorials for those that had been lost, Ambassador Velthara stood at the center of it all. But she looked different now. The terrible months of war had changed her crystalline features, adding depth and shadow where once there had been only pure light. She had seen things her species never imagined: worlds burning, children crying, good people dying while evil ones laughed. "We were fools," she said simply, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "For 3,000 years, we believed that every problem could be solved with the right words. We thought intelligence naturally led to peace, that all conflicts came from misunderstanding." A murmur went through the assembled delegates. Many of them were survivors from the Zephyrian attacks, people who had watched their worlds burn while diplomats tried to find peaceful solutions that didn't exist. "The Zephyrians taught us something terrible and important," Velthara continued. "Some beings choose evil not because they don't understand good, but because they enjoy destroying it. We were not prepared for enemies who refused to communicate because we had never imagined such enemies could exist." General Han Minsu stood up from the human delegation. He was an old soldier with kind eyes, someone who had learned to hate war, while accepting its necessity. "And we learned something too," he said. Having the strength to fight means nothing if you don't know when fighting is right and when it's wrong. Your people taught us that the goal of power should always be peace, not victory. Dr. Park So-young activated the wall displays, showing plans that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "We're building something new," she announced. Schools where Valorian diplomats learn military strategy and human soldiers study advanced communication theory. We're teaching each other what we never knew we needed to learn. The changes were already beginning across the galaxy. On the rebuilt world of Kepler 442, human engineers worked alongside Valorian architects to create cities that were both beautiful and defensible. Federation worlds that had once relied entirely on diplomacy now had both negotiators and soldiers. Captain Li Wujin, now promoted to Admiral of the Combined Fleet, stood to address the assembly. "The new Federation will be different," he said. "Every world will have diplomatic centers and military bases. Every first contact will include offers of friendship and preparations for defense." President Song Hajin smiled as she watched former enemies working together. Species that had fought each other for centuries were now sharing technology and resources, united by the shared experience of nearly losing everything to a common threat. "We learned that being prepared for war makes peace more likely, not less," she said. "When bullies know you can fight back, they're more likely to listen to your words." But the most important change was something that couldn't be seen in buildings or fleets. It was in the way people thought. It's the way they understood the universe and their place in it. Ambassador Velthara had created a new word in the Valorian language, Velthara Cordon. It was impossible to translate exactly, but it meant something. Like peace through protective strength guided by wisdom. It represented an idea that neither species could have developed alone. Commander Won Junho found her looking out at the stars from the observation deck after the formal meetings ended. "Any regrets?" he asked. She considered the question carefully. Around them, the lights of New Geneva sparkled like earthbound stars, a human city built with Valorian aesthetics. It's a symbol of what the galaxy could become when different peoples truly worked together. "About learning to fight?" she said finally. "No, we always knew how to end conflicts once they began, but we never learned how to end conflicts that others begin. We never understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is be ready to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Through the transparent walls, they could see the combined fleet on patrol-sleek Valorian ships flying alongside. Blocky human warships, former Federation enemies, serving together to protect refugee colonies and watch for new threats. Dr. Li. "The children growing up now will be different," he said. "They'll learn diplomacy and tactics together. They'll know that wisdom without strength cannot protect the innocent, but strength without wisdom creates only tyrants." In the distance, a group of young cadets was practicing combat exercises while their instructors taught them negotiation theory. Human children learned the Valorian concepts of deep listening and emotional harmony. Valorian youth studied human ideas about justice and protective responsibility. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, billions of worlds. Countless species, infinite possibilities for both conflict and cooperation. But now, the civilized worlds were ready for both. They had learned that lasting peace required not just wise words, but the strength to protect them. As the three friends watched the stars together, they knew they had witnessed something rare and precious, the moment when former enemies became true allies, when different ways of thinking combined to create something stronger than either could achieve alone. The universe was still dangerous, still full of unknown threats, but it was also full of hope, protected by those who had learned that the greatest victory was not in defeating enemies, but in never having to fight them because they knew the cost would be too high. Peace through strength, strength through wisdom. Wisdom through understanding the galaxy had finally learned to speak all three languages.